My name is Josephine Hartwell. Though everyone calls me Jo, I am 32 years old. A software engineer, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. Last September, I came home from a 5-day conference in Austin, rolled my suitcase up my own driveway, and found my clothes folded into cardboard boxes in the hallway, a brand new lock gleaming on my bedroom door, and my older sister's laughter drifting out from behind it. My parents were sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee I had bought, acting like nothing unusual had happened at all. Taking my bedroom was only the opening move. By the end of that fall, my own family would try to claim half my house as theirs, and what I finally did about it would put 4 people I loved on a court docket, in a room where being related to someone means nothing at all. If you have ever been the responsible one, the one who pays, the one who fixes everything and gets thanked with a shrug, this story might feel a little too familiar. Stay with me, because it gets worse before it gets better. Let me back up, because you need to understand what that house meant to me. It is a 3-bedroom bungalow, just outside downtown Asheville, with a wraparound porch and a dogwood tree that turns the whole yard pink every spring. I bought it 2 years ago. At 30, with no help and no cosigner. I started working part-time in college at 19, wrote code through the night while my friends went to parties, and saved every spare dollar like it was a discipline. Nada Abby. The down payment took 9 years of skipped vacations and a car that rattled every time I hit 40 miles an hour. I am not complaining. I am explaining the math, because my family never once did that math with me. In my family, I have always been the fixer. When my sister Renee drowned in credit card debt at 29, I paid it off quietly and never mentioned it again. When my father's truck broke down the same month our water heater died, I covered both and called it an early birthday gift. When my mother wanted the whole family together for her 60th birthday at a lake house, I booked it, and nobody asked what it cost. Because nobody ever asks the fixer, I minded less than I should have. Being useful felt like being loved. It took me a long time to learn those are not the same thing, but that house was different. It was the one thing in my life that belonged only to me. My name alone on the deed. My key in the lock. On Saturday mornings, I would sit on that porch with my coffee in total silence. And even the silence was mine. I got almost exactly 2 years of that. A quick thought before we go further. Notice how she says almost, keep that word in your pocket. It matters later. Then one Tuesday in February, my mother called, her voice syrupy sweet, and said the sentence that started everything. Honey, we need a little favor. Here was the favor. My parents had sold their old house on Maple Ridge Road, the one my sister and I grew up in, because the yard and the stairs had become too much. They had put a deposit on a new retirement condo across town, and the builder promised it would be ready in about 6 weeks. On top of that, my father was scheduled for hip surgery in a few weeks, and finding a short-term rental that could accommodate a walker was proving impossible. My mother laid it out warm and simple. Just until the condo is ready. Sweetheart, you have all that room. I am not a monster. He is my father. Of course they could stay, but I had watched enough family arrangements sour to know that temporary is one of the most dangerous words in the English language. So I did what I do at work when a project has fuzzy edges. I wrote it down. That night I sent my parents a friendly email with the terms in plain sight. They would take the guest room and the hall bathroom. We would split utilities evenly, and I put a date on it, 8 weeks, with a note that we would revisit together if the condo timeline slipped. My mother replied 4 minutes later. No sentence, no signature, just a single red heart emoji. At the time, I took that as a yes. I know better now. A heart emoji is not a yes. It is a door you left unlocked. Here's my 2 cents. If you've ever sent a carefully worded message to a family member only to get an emoji back, you already know exactly how this story is going to go. They moved in 2 days before my father's surgery, and the first week was genuinely fine. I drove him to the hospital, sat with my mother in the waiting room, and set up the guest room with a shower chair and a pill organizer. That is what family does. And I was glad to do it. The small shifts started in week 2. I came home to find my kitchen rearranged. Pots where the bowls used to live, My good knives buried in a drawer because that was apparently how a kitchen should flow. My coffee maker got demoted to the pantry to make room for my mother's giant percolator. Then my father's recliner arrived from storage, planted in my living room like a boulder. Television running from 6 in the morning until midnight. Volume set somewhere past comfortable. I let it go, piece by piece. Because my father was healing, and the finish line was supposed to be in April. Then April came. And the builder called with a delay. Supply issues, they said. My mother relayed the news with a strange little brightness, patting my arm. Looks like you're stuck with us a bit longer, sweetheart. That same week, hauling laundry past the guest room, I overheard my mother on the phone with my aunt. Her voice easy and proud. Oh, we're all settled in. You should see what we've done with our house. Our house. I stood in the hallway holding a laundry basket and let even that go. Almost, in May. I lost my office. My father's physical therapist recommended a stationary bike. And my mother decided the only possible location was my home office. The one room where I could shut a door and actually earn the money paying for everything. I told her I worked from home 3 days a week. She smiled, like I had said something charming, and moved my monitor to the dining table. You're young. You can work anywhere. For the rest of spring, I took client calls from my dining room table, while a television murmured behind me, and a percolator hissed like a kettle on a slow boil. Quick pause here, because I want you to notice something. Nobody in this story has done anything you could call a crime yet. That's exactly how these situations get you. It's never one dramatic betrayal. It's 100 small ones, dressed up as favors. To be fair, my father did his exercises. He got stronger. By early June, he was walking without the cane and driving again, which meant, if anyone had bothered to ask, the medical reason for any of this was already over. Nobody asked. Then my phone rang, and the screen said Renee. My sister never called me. She had not called on my birthday in 3 years. Renee only called when something was on fire. This time, the fire was her entire life. Renee is 36, 4 years older than me. And until that spring, she had been a regional manager at a logistics company outside Charlotte. The company cut nearly a third of its staff. And she was in that third. She had hidden it from everyone for 2 months, letting her severance quietly disappear while telling her husband, Marcus, that things were in motion. Marcus had recently been laid off himself. Their lease was up in June, and their landlord wanted a signed renewal, or the keys back. All of this came out in one long, aggrieved phone call in which my sister never once said the word sorry. What she said was, "So, we're thinking we'll just set up at your place for a bit. Mom already said it makes sense." I told her I was sorry about the job, that we would figure something out, and that I needed to think, because I already had a full house. That is not a no. I know. I have replayed it 100 times. And it was still not a no. It was a let me think from a woman who had been trained her whole life, never to say the other thing. That weekend, I flew to Denver for a work trip that had been on my calendar for months. Sunday night, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Bria, who lives 3 streets from me. "Hey, random question. Did you know there's a moving truck in your driveway?" I stood at that hotel window doing the time zone math, and understood that whatever I decided no longer mattered. My mother had already opened my front door for them. If you've ever found out about a major decision in your own life, from a friend's text message, instead of your own family, you already know the sinking feeling she's describing. I came home to a house that had been quietly taken over. Renee's SUV sat in my spot on the driveway. The small guest room, the one I used for my treadmill and off-season clothes, was stacked to the ceiling with boxes, with the overflow filling half my garage. Marcus hugged me at the door like this was a happy reunion. My mother stood behind them, beaming, as if she had pulled off a wonderful surprise. "Family shows up for family," she said, squeezing my arm. I did not smile and swallow it. I said, in front of everyone, that this was not what I had agreed to, and that 6 weeks was the absolute limit while they found their own place. My sister laughed it off. "Relax. It's temporary. You sound like a landlord. Everyone chuckled, even my father, and the conversation moved on to nursery colors. Because Renee, it turned out, was expecting, later that night, carrying a box out of the entryway because it blocked the door. I noticed the label written in thick marker. It did not say kitchen or clothes. It said master closet. I stood there holding it, listening to my sister laugh at something on the television in my own living room, and a cold little thought settled into my chest. She had not packed that box for a visit. She had packed it for a house she already considered hers. Let's talk about money for a second, because this is the part these stories always gloss over. My mortgage on that bungalow ran a little over $2,000 a month with taxes and insurance. Fine, I signed for that. But by midsummer, the utility bill for a house holding 5 adults' worth of laundry, showers, and a television that never slept had nearly doubled. Groceries I bought on Sunday were gone by Wednesday. Nobody chipped in unless I asked. And when I asked, my mother acted like I had passed around a collection plate at a funeral. My sister's job search, from what I could tell, consisted of a laptop open to job boards she never actually applied through, and the phrase "I'm doing some consulting," delivered from my couch at 2 in the afternoon. Marcus, meanwhile, had begun taping paint swatches to the wall of my home office. Little squares of sage and soft yellow, talking about when this is the nursery, like it was already decided. In late June, I called a house meeting. I had typed up a 1-page plan chore rotation, a fair utility split, and 2 dates in bold, a check-in for the apartment search, and a firm move-out target in mid-August. A full 6 weeks away. I set the copies on the kitchen table. My sister read the first line and started to grin. She made us a handout. She said to Marcus, and my mother laughed before catching herself. Then my mother put her hand flat on the paper, the way you would soothe a spooked animal, and said, "Sweetheart, we don't do contracts in this family. We take care of each other." My father studied his placemat like it held the answer to something. Nobody signed anything. By that evening, the pages were under a pizza box. That night I opened my phone and started a note. Just the date, what I had proposed, and what was said in response. A small habit, quietly born. If you've ever stood in your own kitchen holding a plan while your family laughed at it, you know exactly what that feels like. Tell me in the comments. If you've been there, I'd genuinely like to know I'm not the only one who's had to write things down just to believe they really happened. 10 days after that meeting, I flew out again for work. That was the last night I ever slept in my own bedroom. I came home the following Monday, rolled my suitcase up the driveway, past Marcus's truck, and climbed my own stairs. In the hallway outside the small guest room sat 4 boxes with my name on them. My clothes, folded by hands that were not mine. My nightstand drawer, dumped into a plastic bag. On top of one box, face down, was the framed photo from my closing day, me on the porch, holding the keys. And on my master bedroom door, where there had never before been a lock because I lived alone, sat a brand new brass knob with a keyhole. I knocked. My sister opened my bedroom door, the way you would open it for a delivery driver. "Oh, hey," she said. "We figured you wouldn't mind. You're barely here anyway. And I need the bigger bathroom. Pregnancy stuff. You get it." My parents were at the kitchen table with their coffee, and the second I walked in, my mother's eyes flicked to the ceiling and back down to her cup. They had not been ambushed. They had helped carry the boxes. They knew. I kept my voice level and said the room would be returned to me by the weekend. Or we had a serious problem. My mother pivoted seamlessly from one argument to another, the way you'd switch lanes on a highway. Pregnant women needed the closer bathroom. A father-to-be needed his own space. I pointed out that the guest room and the master were 4 steps apart on the same floor, sharing the very bathroom Renee and Marcus had already been using for weeks. Nobody had an answer for that, so my sister found a different one. Calling down from the stairs, pleasant as a weather report, or what? That question, or what is the whole story in 2 words? Once someone you love says that to you and means it, you're not negotiating anymore. You're just deciding how long you're willing to keep losing. That Sunday, my family threw a dinner in my house to announce, formally, how they intended to divide it. My mother made a roast. My sister stood up at the head of my table, my chair, and unveiled what she called the family plan, with the bright, rehearsed confidence of someone presenting a business proposal. They would keep the master bedroom, obviously. My office would become the nursery. The living room would be their evening space. And half the garage would go to Marcus's tools and baby gear. Basically, the upstairs and front half is our space, she said, drawing a line in the air over my own dinner table. You've still got your room in the kitchen. Since you're the cook anyway. I waited for someone to laugh. Because it was, objectively, absurd. A woman with no job and no lease was standing in a house she did not own, awarding herself half of it. My mother nodded along. My father studied paint swatches for a nursery being carved out of a room that was, legally and financially, entirely mine. I said one thing. Rennie, this is my house. And my sister looked at me with genuine, unbothered warmth and said the sentence, I will hear for the rest of my life. Come on. Joe. It's not stealing if it's family. Nobody flinched. Forks kept moving. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the guest bed with my laptop, and that night I stopped arguing with my family. I started reading North Carolina law instead. Here is what I learned first. What my family was doing to me was, in the eyes of the law, mostly legal. What I wanted to do back was mostly not. A short aside. Because I think it matters, I called the police that week, half hoping an officer would simply explain to my sister whose name was on the deed. Instead, a kind, tired-looking patrol officer took me aside on my own porch and explained that anyone who has lived somewhere for a while and receives mail there is considered a resident, no matter whose name is on the title. If I changed the locks or moved their things to the curb myself, I would be the one breaking the law. The word he used was eviction. I actually laughed. Evict my own parents. He just shrugged. Like a man who had seen this exact movie play out in nicer driveways than mine. The next morning, before work, I filled a folder, the deed with my name alone on it. Closing documents from 2 years earlier. Mortgage statements paid entirely from my account. The original email, with the 8-week term. A screenshot of that heart emoji with its timestamp. Utility bills before and after. And photographs of the new lock on my bedroom door. I did not leave that folder in the house. There was no longer a single drawer I trusted to stay mine. I carried it to my car and tucked it beneath the spare tire cover in the trunk. My most important documents were safer in a parking lot than inside my own home. On my lunch break, I called a landlord-tenant attorney downtown. A woman named Diane Foster with sharp reviews and a corner office overlooking the courthouse. Diane went through my folder page by page. No expression. And gave me the bad news first. Because the good ones always do. There would be nothing fast about this. My family were, in legal terms, tenants at will, people occupying a home with the owner's permission, but no lease and no rent ever paid. Removing them lawfully meant a staircase with no elevator, a written notice ending their permission to stay. 30 days, if they remained. A formal 3-day statutory notice, and if they still remained, an eviction lawsuit filed at the courthouse, followed by a hearing, and finally, if I won, a court order and a sheriff's visit. 2 to 3 months. Start to finish. If nothing went sideways, then she gave me the good news. Tapping the deed. Sole ownership. No lease. No rent ever paid. Every notice documented. Legally. This is the cleanest case I'll see all month, she said. Emotionally, it's the worst kind I handle. She capped her pen and looked at me the way I imagine a surgeon looks at a patient right before drawing on their skin with a marker. Almost nobody serves their own mother. Whatever happens, the family you had before the paperwork, that version ends. I told her I needed 1 more week, not because I doubted the law, but because I wanted to give my family one last honest chance. Stay with me here. Because what happens next is the part I think you'll want to talk about in the comments. A week later, I offered my family a real compromise. My parents could stay, warmly, with no deadline, until their condo was truly ready. In exchange, they had to back me on one thing. Renee and Marcus needed their own place before the baby arrived. And to make that easier, I would give them $2,000 toward a deposit, plus cover their moving costs. As a gift. Not alone. My sister listened with her arms crossed and then made her counteroffer. She had been thinking. She said. And the smartest long-term move was for me to sell her half the house at its old, pre-renovation value, since charging full price would basically be gouging her own sister. Or, simple still, I could just add her name to the deed. For the baby's stability, it's one signature. Joe. I said no. Just that word. With nothing softening it. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. Into the silence. My mother set down her coffee cup and said, quietly, "Don't make us choose. Joe, you won't like it." That night I signed the attorney's retainer against my dashboard in the driveway. My hands did not shake. That is the part that scared me. What followed were the notices. The family group chat lighting up with a version of events that had nothing to do with the truth. An unexpected trip to the emergency room for my father that nearly broke my resolve. And a courthouse hearing on a plain Tuesday morning in a room with a ceiling fan that ticked. I won't walk you through every single day of it, we'd be here until sunrise. But I do want to tell you the parts that actually changed me. At the hearing, the magistrate asked 4 simple questions. Was there a lease? No. Had any rent ever been paid? In any amount? Ever. Not $1. And my sister confirmed it proudly. As if paying rent would have been the real insult. Was there a written promise about ownership? No, just a primed wall in my office that Marcus had painted halfway through. Calling it sweat equity. Had proper notice been given? Yes. Documented every step of the way. 90 seconds of questions. Judgment for me. Move out ordered within 10 days. In the hallway, afterward. My sister called me a traitor loudly enough that a bailiff drifted closer. I let her run out of air. Then said, at kitchen table volume. You keep saying it's not stealing if it's family. The judge just gave it a different name. My parents used 2 of their 10 days to finally close on their condo, the one that, as it turned out, had actually been ready for over a month. My father, before he left, quietly oiled the back gate hinge he had promised to fix back in the spring, set his house key on the counter with an envelope of cash for utilities, and said the only real apology I got that year. I watched something like this happen to my own sister once, and I never said a word. Turns out quiet is something you inherit. Kid, I'm sorry. My sister used every hour of her 10 days telling anyone who would listen that I would never actually go through with it. On the final morning, a moving crew arrived with a court officer. Marcus's father-in-law showed up unannounced with his own pickup truck, red-faced with embarrassment, and loaded his daughter's life into the bed without a word. Except to tell Marcus, mid-rant about betrayal, nobody took a thing from you. Get in the truck. That night, for the first time in 7 months, I heard my own refrigerator hum in an empty house. People pay a lot of money for less peace than that. Here is the honest aftermath, without a bow tied on it. My nephew was born healthy that November. I heard about it secondhand, through a friend. Because I had been quietly removed from the family group chat since September, I mailed a savings bond anyway. With a short note, congratulations. The door isn't locked. Love. Joe. No reply came. And I decided to let that be the answer for now. My utility bill dropped back to normal, which felt like a rebate on my sanity. I turned my office back into an office. Except for one thing I kept on purpose. The single wall Marcus had primed and never finished. Some mornings I look at it, and it does the work of an entire therapy session. 2 weeks before Christmas, someone knocked on my front door and actually waited for an answer. My parents stood on the porch, my father holding his toolbox, my mother holding a store-bought pie like a treaty she was not sure would be accepted. It was not an apology. Not really. There was no big speech. It was two people who had simply run out of versions of the story where they were the only victims. I let them in. My father fixed a sticking window. My mother set the table without rearranging a single cabinet, which, from her, is practically a peace agreement. We ate. It was careful, and small, and occasionally almost warm. At 7 o'clock, they put their coats on. Because now, apparently, even dinner had a start time and an end time, like any civilized arrangement between adults. At the door, my mother looked around the hallway of the house that had cost us all so much and said quietly, "It's a good house, Joe." From her. That was the whole apology. "I know, Mom," I said, and I locked the door behind them. And the lock was just a lock again. There is a drawer in my kitchen where a spare key sits, uncut by anyone's expectations, waiting for the day someone in my family earns it back. It might wait for years. I have made peace with that. Here is what this entire, exhausting year taught me: a family that only shows up when you are paying for something is not loving you, it is billing you. And the kindest thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is close the account and see who still shows up at your door anyway. That is my story. 1 folder of documents, 2 rounds of legal notices, 4 family members on a court docket, and 1 spare key still waiting quietly in a drawer. If someone's temporary stay is slowly erasing you from your own home, take this as your sign to put things in writing today. And if you've ever had to choose between being someone's favorite person and being their bank, I would genuinely love to hear how you handled it.